Today we continue on with our NHL season previews for the upcoming 23-24 season. We're still looking at teams in the Atlantic Division. Today we preview the Detroit Red Wings. Can they make a step forward, end the streak, and get back to the playoffs? We'll discuss our thoughts coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. It's, of course, as you know, we're continuing on now with our season preview series. This is the second video in the season preview series. We're going by division, starting with the Atlantic. We completed Buffalo first. Now we're on to Detroit. I'm just kind of doing this by, like I said, by division. It's somewhat random, no real particular order. So stay tuned. All 32 teams will be covered before the start of the NHL regular season in October. So Detroit, of course, as we know, had a long playoff run for like 25 years making the playoffs. And then, of course, now they have a streak going the other way. And we've been seeing a rebuild here and missed the playoffs for some time. So we're going to take a look back at last season's results, who are the top scorers, what kind of cap space are they dealing with, and how the team has changed throughout the course of the offseason. Is there any prospects we expect to make an impact coming up on the new season here? Who are their bounce back, breakthrough type candidates, and what's their lineup look like, and see what we think they're going to be able to accomplish this year. So first up, last year they had a record of 35, 37, and 10 for 80 points. Unfortunately missed out on the playoffs. Yet again, obviously they had a good start to the year. Early in the year was looking like, maybe, just maybe there'd be a chance. But of course, things kind of slowly eroded away, and they came back down to life a little bit here and ended up kind of closer to where a lot of people thought they would finish. Of course, missed the playoffs. They now have a 7-year streak of missing the playoffs, last making it back in 2016. A lot of their team stats weren't the greatest either. They scored 240 goals, allowing 279. So they were 24th in goals for, 22nd in goals against. The PK and power play were okay, but not great. Power play was actually better, probably one of their better stats, but was still only 17th in the league with a 21.1% success rate. Now that is something a number of years ago that would have been ranked higher. It goes to show you how many good power plays there are across the NHL. The PK numbers were 78.3, which is something that you do want to see improved upon a little bit. Of course, they were led by Captain Dylan Larkin, who led the way with 79 points. Then there was a big gap. Then you go down to like David Perron, 56. Kubalik and Raymond both had 45. Kopp had 42. So certainly fair to say that they're lacking the high-end production. I mean, I think there's hope that they can have a better result in that area this year with the changes they've made and see some more progress from guys like Raymond as well. So we'll see where things go. As we stand right now, the Red Wings do have some cap space. They have $5.1 million in available space. If they wanted to try to bring in another player, make a trade to take on a higher profile player to add to this lineup, it's something that they could do. But they were certainly very active. Steve Yzerman made a lot of moves. There's a lot of turnover on this Red Wings roster. And to be honest, though, I do think that with the roster moves we've seen, a lot of people are starting to question what we call the Yzer plan in Detroit. It's been a long, lengthy rebuild right now. 7 years out of the playoffs. It's hard to say with any kind of guarantee that they'll make it this year. I do expect them to be better, but they're in a really tough division as well. That's not going to make things any easier on them. But when you're going through a rebuild, it just felt like they were adding at one point a number of years back, picks and prospects, go. And then all of a sudden they kind of shifted a little bit last year in the offseason, adding more UFA signings of veteran players. They brought in Andrew Kopp, they brought in David Perron, players like that. And then we kind of see more of that this year, bringing in more players. And some of them are older, some of them are, still on the younger side of things, but it's a mix. It's not really a traditional rebuild anymore where you see a team bottom out, earn lots of draft capital or trade for younger prospects and kind of have them all kind of grow together. Like that's kind of what you saw or seeing in Ottawa, for example. They drafted Brady Tkachuk, Tim Stützle, obviously Drake Batherson, Jake Sanderson, Thomas Chabot, and they're all kind of growing up together. Some of that's been through trade. Of course, Josh Norris came from the Carlson trade, but he was just freshly drafted at the time, wasn't even an NHLer yet. They had Chikrin, who's still on the younger side of things. That kind of all makes sense. And they added one kind of older veteran in Drew last year. They added one other, older veteran this year in Tarasenko. But for the most part, it's the kids that were drafted growing up together. You see a lot of that in Buffalo as well. But now Detroit has some of that, but they've got mixed in a much older group. It's a very different approach here by Yzerman and the Red Wings. So let's now take a look at how this roster has changed, though, and take a look at the subtractions and the additions for the Red Wings. So leaving this team includes Dominik Kubalik, who was their third highest scorer last year with 45 points. Of course, he was included in the trade with the Senators that brought DeBrincat over, which we'll get into here in a bit. They no longer have Filip Zadina, who was a very high pick as well. That happened right before Yzerman came to Detroit. He was, I believe, the last first-round pick by Ken Holland, and before he left to go to Edmonton. So Kubalik and Zadina are gone. They did not re-sign Pius Suter. Alex Chiasson finished the season there after getting a really late signing. Wasn't retained. Adam Ernie, who came to Detroit, familiarity with Yzerman from time in Tampa, hasn't been overly good. He was not retained. Robert Hagg was let go. You get Gustav Lindstrom, Alex Nedeljkovic, and Magnus Hellberg. So fair bit of change between the pipes. Obviously, some guys that were your number 2, number 3 goalies, not with the team anymore. Obviously, a fair bit of turnover on the blue line. And some forwards as well, including, like I said, some of these guys that were on the younger side of things. So we'll see. Now, who came into Detroit this year? Well, they brought in Alex DeBrincat. Of course, like I said, he's not old. He's not brand new to the NHL either. He's kind of an in-between. Signed him to what DeBrincat wanted, a long-term deal. They had to go on a mid-range deal here, but DeBrincat, of course, has goal-scoring pedigree. I think has actually his chances for success in Detroit are higher than Ottawa, because I don't see the Red Wings forward group kind of being as deep, to be completely honest. Like last year, the Senators were blessed with having 2 power play units that could easily duel each other and compete for the number 1 ice time. And DeBrincat does rely a lot on the power play. I'm not saying he's not good 5-on-5. He is. But obviously, he expects to be first-line minutes, first-line power play, and there was just too much competition in Ottawa with any other guys that it was tough to always put him out there, especially where he did, kind of take a while to kind of get get acclimated, you could say, which is no surprise. You go to a new team, it's not always click from the day one. It takes time, and it could take time again here in Detroit. But DeBrincat's certainly new to Detroit. You get JT Compher comes in on a free agent contract. So as I mentioned, the veteran, additions continue. Like last year, like I said, we saw Perron come in. We saw Kopp come in. And now this year they got DeBrincat, they got Compher, they add Jeff Petrie, who certainly much older, and declining. You got Klim Kostin, who they got from Edmonton. Kostin certainly found his game with the Oilers. Hopefully he can be a good fit in the bottom 6 role with Detroit. I don't mind him. He's on the younger side of things. Shane Gostisbehere, certainly after leaving Philly, obviously went to Arizona. Played well. Played himself into a trade. Had a chance to play in the playoffs last year. Became a free agent. I don't mind the Gostisbehere signing in Detroit. They signed Justin Hall. Justin Hall is not the greatest defender. I mean, if he's in the right role for the right money, I guess maybe. I'm a little surprised they went down that road, but still. They're bringing Daniel Sprong. That's a good pickup. Sprong could be a sneaky good scorer for them. He's on the younger side of things. They get Christian Fischer from Arizona on a cheaper 1-year, $1 million deal. Good bottom 6 forward. And, of course, they bring in veteran goaltender James Reimer, who's near the end of his career as well. So, as I mentioned, it's almost like some of these guys are going to box out some of their prospects, though. That's the change in mentality that it seems to be. Like, it became less and less about the top picks developing into their top players, and it's almost like, they lost confidence in a lot of these guys, and you're like, okay, well, I guess we're going to have to go out and get some veteran players. So now, if you take a look at what their lineup's going to look like, there's a lot of players that were acquired through free agency and trade and not drafted. So it's just, like I said, it's a whole different approach. This team has changed quite a bit. As far as prospects to watch that you expect to hopefully have an impact on this year's roster, well, Simon Edmondson on the back end is one, but to be honest, I don't know that he's going to be able to play a whole lot. I think Edmondson is going to be probably looking at being ranked as number 7, 8 on the depth chart. Like, I don't know that Evanson's going to get a spot. I expected him to be full-time this year, especially after being drafted with such high pedigree, and I know they were really fond of him. Certainly saw that with Seider, but I don't know that we're going to see that with Edvinsson. I do expect him to have some sort of impact on this roster this year, but it might not be to the degree that we might have thought. You're going to take a look out for Marco Kasper. Kasper, I believe, will play in the AHL if he doesn't make the NHL roster. I think he can probably give some of these guys a run, but again, I think he's going to be a player that we see called up when they need players. Same with Elmer Soderblom. I mean, obviously, he's another big monster back there who had his moments and looked like he might stick, but then obviously had some injuries too. And I don't know, I'm not really sure where Soderblom fits this year. Certainly a player that will get some time, but again, don't know that he's going to be a regular, depending on injuries, of course. So we'll have to see. Now, of course, like I said, in this series, I'm also adding in, and I'll kind of do a video later into the offseason here before the season starts, talking about some of the top candidates, but I'm doing a bounce back and breakthrough candidate for each player. And for a bounce back player, I'm going with Alex DeBrincat. Like, obviously last year was not a down year in total in Ottawa. Point-wise, assist-wise, he did well and actually kept his numbers pretty close to what he's used to. But his goal scoring was down a bit. You know, he's hit 40 goals twice, hit 27 last year at the Sens. I expect him to get more top-line minutes, more first-line power play time, and I just expect because of that, and hopefully find better chemistry, that he will have more goals and be at least over 30. I don't know if he'll hit 40 again. We'll see. I wouldn't completely rule it out. The other thing with DeBrincat in Ottawa last year, too, is that he didn't really have the centerman he was supposed to play with. That's the thing. Is when you started the season, you had Tkachuk and Stützle, Batherson, Giroux, DeBrincat, Norris. And then Norris, 4 or 5 games into the year, suffered a season-ending shoulder injury and was out all year. So they had to elevate Shane Pinto. The first line was quite often like Timmy Stützle going to center and playing with Giroux and Tkachuk was their best 3-player combination. And that kind of forced DeBrincat to play more second line and not always be on the first power play. So it was kind of a situation based on injuries too. Obviously, I know he was likely more happy to play in Michigan, where he's from. There's other factors at play here. But at the end of the day, it just didn't work out. It's just that simple. But I think he can bounce back. Like I said, he's closer to home. He's getting a fresh start. Hopefully, he'll be a bigger role and can hit those goals that we expected to see last year. As far as a breakthrough player, I think we're looking at Lucas Raymond. Obviously, Raymond came in the same draft as Timmy Stützle. Last year, we saw Timmy Stützle take a huge step forward and hit over 90 points. And now Raymond hit 45. So, can he take a big step forward and really provide more offense? That's going to be critical into this team having more success this year, as they need more secondary scoring. So Raymond taking some big steps forward will be huge. Obviously, there's some other guys like a Berggren, for example, and obviously you can get maybe a Daniel Sprong, continuing what he did last year with Seattle will obviously be big as well. So, but I think Raymond could be their biggest breakthrough, which would have a big impact if that does indeed happen. Now, looking at their projected lineup, this is courtesy of dailyfaceoff.com, and we'll take a look at where they feel. This is almost more of a depth chart, to be honest. These lines are not going to be exact, so please don't leave comments saying this player is going to play with that player and so on. I understand that this is not perfect. This is just based on projections and depth. And we'll take a look here. But obviously, Larkin's your top center. We expect him to play with Alex DeBrincat and likely David Perron. Or you could put Raymond over there as well. I know they have Perron on this first line. I honestly think that there's a possibility Perron could play there, but I wouldn't be surprised if they go with Raymond there. And you're going to see Raymond, Larkin, and DeBrincat likely get a lot of power play time together anyway. So that's a possibility. You could see Perron on the second line with Kopp and Berggren. Or you might even see a player like Daniel Sprong maybe come up and kind of steal a second line role depending on how Berggren does. I mean, he can handle that spot if it's up for grabs. But Berggren should hopefully be able to hold it down, and I think that's what the Red Wings would like to see from him this year. But again, like when you're looking at like Andrew Kopp, Perron, Berggren, like they're good players, but that's not the most offensive second line, So certainly that's a bit of a concern. That's why I mentioned before, like secondary scoring to me is a big issue. You get some higher end players like Larkin, DeBrincat. You're hoping Raymond will get up into that category this year too, but otherwise it kind of falls off more than you'd like to see. Going down the chart here, JT Compher obviously had a big year in Colorado last year. That's going to be tough for him to duplicate. I think he'll get more of a third line center role unless you flip him and Comp and he plays more second line. No matter what though, Compher, due to injuries, got an elevated role last year in Colorado as well. So I do wonder, and he got to play with some pretty good talent, which certainly helped his numbers. I'm not saying he isn't a good player. I'm not saying he's not capable. I think he is, but I think he just kind of, I don't know if the expectations would be too high. You might see a little bit of a dip in point totals this year. Don't be shocked if that happens. So Compher with Fabry, and they have Fisher here, but honestly, I think Sprong might be a better fit for that line. Put Fisher on the fourth line with Kostin and Rasmussen. There's no full-time spot there for Joe Velino. He would be, at this point, I would pencil him in being your 13th forward. So that's your forward projected lineup. On the D core, you got Seider likely playing with Jake Wallman. Your second pair is probably the old Montreal guys and Ben Sherratt and Jeff Petrie. And then you got Justin Hall and Shane Gostisbehere as your third pair. And then again, like I said, I don't see room for Edvinsson. So I'm not sure what the plan is for Simon Edvinsson this year. But it's hard to getting him into that full-time spot. You got Husso and Reimer will make up your goaltending tandem. That much we do know. There's just been a lot of change on this team last year. And if you look at the D-core, there's not a lot of speed back there. You got, some older players like Hall, Petrie, especially like the two of the three guys that come in that are new. I don't know. They've been on a decline and they haven't played the greatest. So we'll have to see how that works out. I do have some concerns. But, I mean, if they can play their best and actually show some improvement on what we've seen recently, then maybe it'll be all right. Thankfully, they're not like signed super long term or anything of that nature, but just not the guys I expected Detroit to kind of bring in. I know Petrie, again, another Michigan native, but at the same time, if he can play the right amount of minutes in the right situations, it should work out okay. I just don't know. I'd rather see Petrie play more of a third pair role at this point and be able to pitch him with some offense, but then you get Justin Hall moving up to the second one, and I'm not sure he's really capable of that. He played the top four a lot for Toronto and quite often was outmatched and quite often the team's whipping boy by their fan base. So I don't know if that's really going to go over well. So as far as the questions facing this team and what I see moving forward, my big concern is that there's so much change. You got 5 new forwards, 3 new defensemen, and 1 new goalie. It's, and I guess maybe you could say, well, based on the results, a lot of these changes were justified and warranted, and that's absolutely accurate. But my only concern was with that many changes, are you going to be able to get the chemistry that's needed to really take a big step forward, or is it going to be maybe just another small step, and then maybe in 2 years from now we'll see a bigger step? I don't know. It's a lot of change, and I've seen other teams go through this before, and sometimes too much change can have a setback before you can take the step forward. I mean, maybe they start slower, and then halfway through the year you really see them turn it on. But again, you don't win the cup in November, but you can lose your spot to even compete for it if things don't go well in the first 2 months of the season. But as much as I do like a lot of the changes, like I like DeBrincat coming in, I do think if you look at their top 6, between Larkin, DeBrincat, Raymond, those are all good players that could be there for a long time. David Perron, obviously an older player, won't be there too long. Kopp, not the most offensive guy. I think he's better suited for a third line role. Compher, I guess we'll see. He quite often was a third line player in Colorado, got elevated last year. Just to me, they have a lot of guys in their forward group that should be bottom 6, and they're not, and some of them are top 6. So I'm not sure that they're going to be able to improve their offensive numbers. You might see better production out of the top line, and you likely will see a case of there not being such a big gap, hopefully, between Larkin and the next leading scorer. I think, hopefully, if Raymond can take a big step forward and DeBrincat can get closer to what he was before in Chicago, then you're going to have your number 2 and 3 scorers on the team hopefully be closer and at least have a really good first line. But after that, the fall off is where my concern is. Robbie Fabry, a good player, good goal scorer, but he's always seems to be hurt. And then, Kostin, Rasmussen, these guys they're not guys that are going to give you a ton of offense. So, and then on the backside, you've got a top pair of Wallman and Seider that I'm happy that I think will be good. And after that, there's concern. Gostisbehere has been trending more upwards after having some downtime in Philadelphia. So I think he's a good addition. I'm just not sure on the other ones. Time will have to wait and see here. Might be tough on the goaltenders, that much for sure. So ultimately, the big questions, is secondary scoring, is the defense going to be better? What happens to their prospect? Is there really room here to get any younger players like Kasper and Evansson into this lineup? What about Velino, Soderblom? It almost feels like Yzerman's kind of given up on a lot of the youth, and they're bringing in all these placeholder veterans. And I just don't know that they're going to be better. So to be completely honest, I don't think Detroit's going to get into the playoffs this year. I will agree, and I will say that I think they might be able to improve on their point totals. I think the number that's going to take to get in the playoffs for points this year will be a little bit higher than last year. Let me look at Buffalo. I think they had 91 and they just missed. So I wouldn't be shocked if that number this year maybe is 94, 95 to get in. It's going to be tough, but I do see the rebuilds of the Sabres and the Senators to be further along than the Red Wings, and I don't know that Detroit will be able to keep up with those two teams. And it's going to be complicated in the Atlantic, as I mentioned in the Sabres video, because we don't, and I got to finish analyzing some of these other teams, but, Florida had a big run to the finals last year. Are they going to be back to being a dominant team, or, what have you? They got some things to deal with there. The Bruins, another interesting team, major changes there. Is Tampa taking a step back? Are they going to be able to maintain? And of course with Ottawa, Buffalo pushing forward, how is this going to change the dynamic of the division? And what is Detroit really up against here? Honestly, between Toronto, Tampa, the Boston, Florida, a little tougher to read right now than Buffalo, Ottawa pushing. It's tough. It really is tough. They may be positioned to be, in the bottom couple spots of the division again. The playoff streak of missing might move to 8 years from 7 years, but, they may prove me wrong. I just don't know that, they became a team, like I said, that are just a little bit older and just a lot of mid-range players lacking that high-end talent. They've got a stud defender in Seider, couple of really good forwards, and after that, it's just all mid. So let me know what you think on Detroit. Will they make the playoffs? Has the Yzer plan been effective, or do you think it's kind of gone off the rails here? And, agree with me that maybe some of these changes just don't make sense. Let me know what you think in the comments, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. Lots more teams to come in the season previews, as well as all the daily news and rumors from around the NHL as well. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.